state sponsor of terrorism before they get a nuclear weapon? Does it say anywhere that we can't?
Again, sir, to the contrary.
Okay. Also, my colleagues on the other side are really concerned about cost. So let's get down to cost. What's the value of an American life?
Priceless. I would say.
Well, how much money should we spend to save an American life?
I think.
How much money should we spend to save, let's say, 10,000 lives, 100,000 lives, 1,000,000 lives? How much money? I mean, do you guys have that?
I don't know if we have that kind of actuarial. I suppose the insurers do, but I don't think of an answer. But I think obviously everything has a price.
Yeah, because they're very concerned about the cost of certain strikes on narco-terrorists that were transporting poison into the United States and killing lives. I guess there must be some kind of metric here that, how much is that worth, okay? So do you have that at all?
I mean, I think we can get a sense of the cost. One thing that's important to bear in mind on the question of cost is, as the president has pointed out, those forces are going to be active somewhere. And I think what we're saying is we're not going to solve every problem with to hammer everything as a nail. That's not the issue here. We are prepared to use all elements of American national power to address the threat of, that's killing hundreds of thousands of Americans.
But every once in a while, you do have to use that hammer.
Exactly.
You try not to use the hammer, right. But every once in a while,
which you're prepared to, and that's part of the peace through strength mantra of the.
And the cost of such a thing in order to save American lives, I don't think that's part of the equation, because the number one job of this government, and any government actually, is to protect its citizens.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely, we got to be, and that's putting regular Americans' interests first, and their protection, their security is what this strategy is all about, and what the president's agenda is all about.
That being said, I want to move on to something else. By the way, I agree with a lot of my colleagues that we are not strong enough with Russia against Ukraine. I'm a big supporter of Ukraine, and in order to stop our adversary, especially our number two adversary in his tracks, I think we need to help Ukraine more. And deny Russia what it wanted to do, because you want to deny aggression. And if they somehow gain by this act of aggression, then you're just incentivizing further aggression. And so by helping Ukraine, you're actually showing peace through strength.
Well, sir, if I could address that, I mean, under the president's leadership, we are helping Ukraine. I was trying to lay it out a little bit. We've set up this Pearl initiative, and the Europeans are stepping up, and we're seeing that. When I was in the UDCG last month, we saw very vividly European leadership on providing air defense capabilities. And so in a sense, the model is actually working, and that will contribute not only towards peace, but to a lasting.
But we should be unambiguous in who we back and who the bad guy is. We should be unambiguous in that, because I know who the bad guy is, all right? And we should say that very clearly. Shifting over, the National Defense Strategy places renewed emphasis on defending the homeland and strengthening security within the Western Hemisphere, which I fully support, because for far too long, we have been, our focus has been elsewhere. And this is our backyard, this is our home, okay, the Western Hemisphere. Given the growing military and intelligence presence of China and Russia in the region, what steps is the department taking to counter the malign influence and security threats emanating from authoritarian regimes, such as the regime in Cuba, and frankly, the regime that's still in Venezuela?
Some of it I can't get into, sorry, sir, in this setting, but I think we are taking proactive action using all elements of national power to diminish adversary influence and involvement in the hemisphere. On the issue of Cuba, I'll obviously defer to the State Department or the White House, but I think we recognize clearly the danger and the menace posed by the government in Havana.
Well, I also think that the government that's still in Venezuela, it's the interim dictator, not an interim president, continues to pose a threat to the United States. No matter how they are cooperating with us now, they're just waiting us out. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colby, good to see you again. To date, the department has failed to comply with Section 1067 of the FY25 NDAA, which requires the department to provide us with copies of each extant execute order issued at the direction of the President and the Secretary. When can we expect the department to comply with this law?
I'll have to get back to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Are we at war with Iran?
I think we're in a military action at this point. I'll leave it to Congress and lawyers, et cetera, from the administration to determine the exact.
Okay, so yesterday, the president said we're doing very well on the war front, and previously he said we should expect American casualties because, quote, that often happens in war. So is the president wrong when he says we are at war?
Well, I won't add or subtract anything to the president. I wouldn't presume to do so, but I know this is a material matter in front of the Congress and between the administration. I'm not the right person to weigh in on exactly the criteria.
Okay. You said that regime change is not one of the objectives of this military operation. Is that correct?
Of the U.S. military campaign at this time as directed by the president.
Okay. If that's the case, can you explain why the first military target of the joint U.S.-Israeli operation was Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei?
My understanding is that's an Israeli strike. We can get you more detail, including this afternoon in the classified briefing.
Okay, well, President Trump clearly disagrees because he immediately took credit for this, saying, I got him before he got me. And shortly after the strikes on Saturday, Trump told the Iranian people, bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we're finished, take over your government. It will be yours. This is probably your only chance for generations. And your boss, Secretary Hegseth, literally said he made sure that the people responsible in the Iranian regime to try and take out President Trump were on the target list. How does arming the Kurds and encouraging a civil war advance our military objectives of degrading Iran's power projection capabilities?
Ma'am, I'm not sure I can comment on that. I'm just not tracking it specifically, but I can get into it, get back to you or into classified.
Okay, great. I'd like to enter into the record 3 articles about how we are arming the Kurds.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so you won't say if we're at war. You won't say if regime change is actually part of our thing. Do you agree that there is a risk of Iran becoming a failed state?
I think there are a wide range of risks, but I think those are the kinds of things that we are precisely seeking to avoid and capitalize on to make sure it's net beneficial for the American people.
Okay, and does the department actually have a plan to avoid that and prevent a failed state in this very strategic part of the world?
Well, without fixating on the specific eventuality, ma'am, I would say the department is actively planning to ensure that we are, deliver on the president's objective of a net beneficial result for this military campaign.
Okay, you keep saying that it's important that we have a plan and that you are working on the plan. What is the plan?
Ma'am, I can, it may be worth when my colleagues, or we can go in, but particularly when my colleagues come over and brief this afternoon, you may ask them. Obviously, we're not going to talk about that in open session.
Okay, how long will this war last? How much longer will our service members have to sacrifice their lives?
So I'm not going to take away the president's decision space. He's got the wide range. He's the master of that. As he has indicated, and Chairman Kaine as well, the military campaign, at least at this point, has been scoped out, or I would say people have discussed it as roughly 3, 4, 5 weeks. But that, of course, does not constrain the president's decision space. But again, goes back to the kind of phasing of the military campaign that's been given specifically to the U.S. Armed Forces.
Okay, and what about cost? Can you say how much this will cost the American people?
I'll get back to you, ma'am. I can't give you an answer at this point.
Okay. Mr. Colby, at his first press conference, your boss, Secretary Hegseth, said this mission is laser-focused, destroy offensive missiles, destroy missile production, destroy their Navy, and they will never have nuclear weapons. In 2003, just as Operation Iraqi Freedom was getting underway, President Bush said, our mission is clear, to disarm Iraq of weapons of mass destruction, to end the regime's support for terrorism, and to free the Iraqi people. Remind me, Undersecretary Colby, how long did Operation Iraqi Freedom last?
I'm actually not sure technically, a decade or something.
It took 8 years before Iraq became even remotely stable at a cost of thousands of American lives and trillions of taxpayer dollars. Secretary Hegseth said this week that we're not doing nation building. We don't do quagmires, no democracy building exercise. In fact, his predecessor as Secretary of Defense, Secretary Rumsfeld, said, and I quote, I don't do quagmires. You just said that this isn't going to be another Iraq. Secretary Rumsfeld himself said, of course it won't be Vietnam. We're going to go in, overthrow Saddam, and get out. That's it. The American people are not stupid, Undersecretary Colby. This administration keeps telling us this is not Iraq while using the exact same arguments that were used to justify the war in Iraq. We have already had 6 service members die in this war and dozens more injured. And you can't even give me an answer on what the plan is or what the objectives really are. Our embassies have been attacked. At least $90 million worth of fighter jets were shot down by our allies. And you literally can't even tell me whether this is a war, what we're trying to achieve, or how much it's going to cost the American people. My generation has been paying our entire lives for forever wars that your president promised to end. And yet you sit here today unable to provide us with any clarity. Our service members and the American people deserve better. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Luttrell, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would first like to say my thoughts and prayers are with the family, hopefully are with the families of the service members that we lost. May the good Lord put peace in everyone's heart. Mr. Colby, thank you for being here today. In the NDS, it emphasizes our essential responsibility of the Department of War is to ensure that we always are able to negotiate from a position of strength in order to sustain peace in the Indo-Pacific. What is your perspective on ensuring we have self-sustaining energy capabilities to operate in a contested space? In particular, as we move forward in technology, the development of mobile tactical microgrid power systems, if you're familiar with that. And I'd like to get your perspective on how that will help enable, and as I think it will, our warfighters in those
Well, thank you,
places.
Congressman, and I'm not an expert on that specific issue, but I do think the ability to have